Number 4, too much information. Whenever I'm helping somebody prepare for a pitch, the one thing that I fight with them is their desire to give too much information. And the thought is, the more information I give, this is the intuitive thought, the more they'll know that I'm the expert at the content. What you have to remember, you got the invitation to present. By default, you're already known as the expert. So dumping on them more information, all it does is cloud the message. Hear that loud and clear. It clouds the message. People will not understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish if you force them to have too much information. Mark Twain had wrote a great letter one time, and at the beginning of the letter he says, "I apologize for writing such a long letter, but I did not have enough time to write a short letter." The point of that is it takes time to have a concise message. It's easy to get in there and slop up a bunch of information that you want to throw to somebody, but it'll take time in reducing that presentation down. That's how you clarify that. You continue to hone it. One of the most famous presentations there ever was the Gettysburg Address. Anybody know how long that presentation was? Anybody remember? 7 minutes? Would you?
I was thinking 3 or 4.
Yeah, a little over 2 minutes was that presentation. And yet it's one of the most famous presentations of all times. 276 words are in the Gettysburg Address. If there's any place to point to about how if you have a concise message, it's there. Next is a lack of creativity or big idea. If you had to ask me when I'm working with somebody on a presentation, the one thing that I can count on, sadly, is predictability. If 3 people, and Philip and I have talked about this, if 3 people go in and give a pitch about why they should be hired, if you took away the company name, 9 times out of 10, they'd all look exactly alike. So if you're the buyer, and you see presentations that all look alike, that all have the same format, that start off with, here's our mission statement, here's our organizational chart, here's our services. If you go through all of those kinds of things, there is going to be as predictable and then making you non-memorable as possible. And the presentation, you want to make sure that you're memorable. Okay? Now, some people say, gosh, I don't have a big idea. You know, you might be thinking about this, I don't have a big idea, but I would tell you, and I just point back to Sunday, we were at church and the minister talked about the Lord's Prayer, okay? And he talked about what is prayer, and he went through the 4 points of prayer, okay? He's talking about a book that was written over 2,000 years ago, and yet he was making it fresh. That's the secret in giving a presentation, is taking content and somehow figuring out how to make it fresh. All right, so those are the 5 things that you talk about before a presentation. And you can see there's so many things to consider. Now let's talk about you're actually up to give a presentation, you're ready to go. Now what do you do? The first mistake people will make will be a lack of client interaction. We like to teach it at the beginning of a presentation, ask a question. Do something to get them involved. When I worked for IBM for 10 years, one of the things that they had us do, and I believe that every presentation ought to start off this in a selling environment, is they'd have you stand up at the presentation and say, okay, Mr. or Miss potential customer, here's what we understand are your goals for today. And they'd have those goals written up there. And then they'd say, are these still your goals for today? Then we would say, if you had to prioritize those goals, how would you prioritize those goals? And we would then say, this is the most important. And, oh, no, that's the second most important. And we would use that at the beginning of the presentation to get the client engaged. Then at the end of the presentation, we'd come back and say, let's talk about how do we do compared to what your goals for today were. I mean, what a great way to get somebody involved, to be client-focused, to be focusing on them, and then to make sure that you stayed on track by going to do that. And in a sales environment, let's say what would even be better is, yes, we covered that, but I'm still confused about that topic here. Great, now you have a chance to go back and redo that. If you don't revisit that, they're going to walk out, and in the car as they leave, they're going to say, I'm still confused about whatever. Are you? And what if they all said, yeah, I'm still confused about that? You don't want that to happen in your presentation.